Welcome to the Making Schools Work podcast, a podcast for everyone in education. This show is brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. At SREB, we believe that every school has the potential to be great. Whatever you do in the school, whatever your job may be, let's talk about things that make schools work.
Welcome to the SREB Making Schools Work podcast. This is Senior Instructional Coach Daniel Rock. Today we have the Director of Instructional Programs, Jason Adair, and Senior Coach Debbie Robertson. Hello, Jason and Debbie. How are you today?
Doing great.
Dan, thanks for having us.
I brought you on today because you both are spearheading a professional learning design in a multi-million-dollar grant from the Department of Education to teach teachers in North Carolina how to improve math instruction. It's called the HOPE model for professional learning. So Jason, quickly explain what the HOPE model is and what HOPE stands for.
So the HOPE model, we're still going to deliver professional development to teachers, but we're going to do it in a more interactive way. So the H stands for here. So the teachers are going to, during the day of professional development or the half day, but during that time slot, we have professional development that's going to occur in the school. They're going to hear about some strategy, some tools. They're going to learn. And then right after they learn, they're going to observe. So we're going to go into a classroom. Me or Debbie, the professional developer, is going to do a lesson with the students where the teachers are able to observe the thing they just heard about in action. Then we're going to come out of that setting and we're going to debrief what they saw. And then they're going to plan how to enact that in their classroom the next day. And then the last thing is E. They're going to enact that exact strategy, piece of information, whatever we're trying to get them to implement in their classroom the next day or the next week very quickly. So we're getting teachers to implement whatever practice we're trying to focus on.
You're going to teach it to them, observe, they're going to see it in action with students. They're going to talk about it and then plan based on what they saw. And then they're going to enact. They're going to use what they did and transfer it in their classroom. What problem were you trying to solve that you decided to design this PD?
For a professional developer, one of my favorite comments for a while is professional development typically occurred, at least for me, was we would all go into a room. We'd work for a day on strategies or whatever. We'd learn something. And then they'd go back to their classroom, potentially enact it. And it's that potential that was frustrating. I'd show up week, 2 weeks, a month later, they'd be like, how's it going? Oh, we haven't done that yet. And so the problem was, why haven't you done it? Lots of different reasons. But we were seeing research-based strategies sit on the shelf. And we wanted to do something different. I was brainstorming with Debbie, different things we could try. What if we just did it with the teachers in the moment?
Mm-hmm.
That removed that excuse of, well, that wouldn't work with, my kids at this school. Because we'd show a video of it in action or demonstrate it in action, but it really wasn't enough. And so this kind of removed that barrier. Well, that wouldn't work with these kids.
You started doing this in Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the genesis of those first times you started doing it, what that was like, and how you made that leap from the traditional? What you're describing is familiar to me. I'll do a professional learning, and sometimes it goes amazing. And I get all fives. People come up to me afterwards and say, that was great. And my ego is like, you really deserve this job, Daniel.
Yep.
You are the man.
Yep.
The Lord has placed you here to help these people. I'm so happy. I can't wait to see you guys in a few weeks. I go back and go through classroom after classroom and tell the teachers, remember when we had that thing? The point of that wasn't a performance. That wasn't a theater piece. That was meant for you to enact. So I feel what you're saying. My question, I'd like to go back to those first moments where you changed what was happening and how did you work with those teachers in Delaware and that district and the school to say, we're going to blow up our traditional PD and change this? I'm interested in what that was like.
If I could jump in, Daniel, and talk about real quick, like the hope model, those frustrations that you feel in the classroom after doing a professional development and going back 2 weeks later and nothing happening, that remotely looks like what you guys learned in professional development, that was the frustration we were feeling. And when we began to think about what is happening, what is preventing this professional development, the learning that we're doing, what is preventing that from transferring to the classroom? And so that's the impetus behind thinking through how we do professional development, how we could do it differently.
What was challenges you had to think about as you worked with schools to say, we're going to do professional learning, but then I want to get into your classroom? Like those initial conversations.
Debbie was doing work in this district in Delaware. It was our traditional model. We deliver professional development. She'd spend a couple of days later watching these things called formative assessment lessons be implemented. We were part of this big grant. We were rolling out professional development. And in conversations with the district, they're like, what would this look like in elementary school? And that's when Debbie called me and we had a call with the district and we talked about the good that was coming out of the work that was happening. One of the downfalls of why it was sporadically being implemented was that lack of seeing it. So when talking with the district, we're like, what if we flipped it on its head? We want to do this stuff. Let's show them what it looks like. When we worked with the district, we knew we had to create a relationship with the teachers first. Like we can't just blind go into their classroom. It's not going to mean anything. They don't know who Jason is or Debbie. And so we did have an initial 2 or 3 day professional development where we did math with them, but also formed relationships so that when we went into the classroom, we had some capital. And then when we came back, and we did that without students, like preschool. And then in the weeks coming up, we're like, you're going to teach for a little while, try a few things if you want, but then we're going to come back and we're going to come into your classroom. And they're like, they were shocked because teachers also have a rhythm of what professional development looks like. Mm-hmm. And so that first visit, I still remember. I had them for the morning. We did some stuff on teacher questioning and how we can not funnel questions and how we can focus them. I think we have an episode about that if you want to scroll back. Then I was like, okay, let's go into the classroom and we're going to do this lesson. I'd asked them ahead of time what they were teaching, prepared a lesson, and we all planned our questions. I taught. Asked a funneling question every once in a while so I could look up at the teachers and say, hey, that was a funneling question. I funneled. So they could see what happened. We reflected. And when they came out, the ahas were like, doing it with their students removes all, because they can't say, well, that wouldn't work. I just did it with your kids. They got to see the harm of a funneling question and put themselves in it when we came out.
Walk me through the timeline of a hope cycle. Like I'm thinking about the logistics, the minutes through the day or days. Like if I'm a teacher and I sign up for this, what is that commitment in terms of time from H to E?
For the year, we had the initial 2-day PD plus 4 touch points throughout the year, 1 per quarter. And we had them for a whole day. All the 3rd grade teachers in the school or a couple schools would come over and we had them for a day. From the morning, 1.5 to 2 hours of professional development where we are learning something. Could have been a strategy or a tool, but we're learning something. Then 8 to 10 o'clock.
8 to 10, I'm a teacher. Jason is teaching me how to ask better questions, how to assess my students, how to do this math strategy.
You got it.
Okay.
Then we walk through the lesson. I do a think aloud of the things I was thinking about when I planned the lesson and the look fors that they should be looking for when we're teaching that lesson. Then 10 o'clock comes, 10:15 comes, and that's when we walk into a classroom. The 6 teachers are standing in the back. We like having a graphic organizer so that they have some focused questions that they're looking for instead of one of the mistakes we learned was when we just go in cold. They see would label trivial stuff.
Right.
Oh, I like how you blah, blah, blah. It
Right.
has nothing to do with whatever we had just learned
Strategy.
about. So we focus and then teach the lesson with the kids. As is, at some points, I talk directly to the teachers. Sometimes they talk back to me. So there's this feedback loop that doesn't exist in traditional professional development because they're seeing it in action.
In theater, we would call that you break the fourth wall.
I break the fourth wall. I'm going to use
You're like a Shakespeare character and you speak directly to the audience and
Right.
say, do you see what I'm doing here? That was a mistake.
Yeah.
I'm going to try this again. And the kids are
So
like,
it becomes a learning experience in the moment. So there's this reflection happening. Sometimes I'll be walking around and the teacher will, I invite them to walk. I tell the kids what's happening before I invite the teachers to walk around. Sometimes they're hovering near me and they'll ask me questions. Why did you do that? They're reflecting as that lesson is happening. So then when I teach the lesson, high five the kids on the way out. We all leave. One adult stays in the room because that's legally required. And then we come out and we go back to the PD room and we debrief what just happened.
that's the,
That's still, I'm going to call it the O.
okay.
Okay. So now think about what you're about to teach. I want you to plan your next lesson or two, planning to integrate the concepts that we talked about. We're going to plan in the moment and we're going to do teach backs. We're going to do turn and talk to your partner and teach them. We're going to put them in that situation so that they are starting to create that movie so that when they get to the enact phase, they've seen it, they've talked about it, they've lived it. It's not so scary to them so that it doesn't just go sit on the shelf.
I think each phase is very carefully orchestrated and follows a pattern of, like Jason said, what we found is that when we tried to do the observe without giving specific look fors or this graphic organizer, when we came out to debrief, the debrief was all over the place because they were not looking for what we had just learned. So we really needed to add in that piece so that here's the strategy you're learning this morning. Now we're going to transfer that to your classroom. You get the privilege of standing in the back like an instructional coach and viewing the whole thing in action and hearing and seeing what happens, for instance, when Jason asks a funneling question versus an advancing question. And then we debrief it so that we're all on the same page as to what just happened and how those strategies impacted student outcomes, student learning. And then the planning is very structured as well, because even if we stopped at the observe, how do we know that they're going to take that and transfer it? So the planning phase is very orchestrated to where they plan, and then we help them walk through. We coach them through what is the lesson actually going to look like. We've had instances where the teachers may pick a task and begin to talk it through or teach it back to each other and realize, oh, wow, that task is not going to accomplish what I need it to accomplish. Let's adapt that task. So those are things that we feel like that collaboration is extremely important around the planning piece.
Yeah.
So do that with us in the room. And then they enact it. And that's where they receive, in the model that we're using right now in North Carolina, they video themselves and they watch their lesson back and give themselves feedback. And then the instructional coach watches it and gives them feedback. And then they have a face-to-face debriefing via Zoom. They debrief the lesson together. So just putting all of those pieces in place to make sure that we remove any obstacles to the transferability of what they're learning.
I'm looking at this from the perspective of a school leader who wants to use this. And I'm hearing 6 teachers. Now, you're in that first Delaware example, right?
Mhm.
So how many teachers did you say were in a group?
Probably had as many as,
And those
eventually
teachers
there's
are,
too many adults in the room, right? Like we're like scare the kids. I mean, the kids I've learned, like we preface this with the kids. Hey, today we're going to come in. This is what we're doing as teachers. This is why there's all these adults in the room. They're here to watch me, not you. We're going to learn from this experience. Kids are like, oh, okay, they're resilient. They buy in.
Yes.
So there's not a cap, but what the ratio to 1, that's a little high.
Would you say that were they all the math teachers from the same school, or was it all math?
The elementary school teachers teach everything, but it was math focused. Sometimes math teachers from that school and another school would come. All the 3rd grade teachers from these 2 schools, 6 to 9 teachers.
It was grade level specific.
Grade level.
Right.
Yes.
Grade level
Correct.
specific.
It's nice if you have that capability. I don't think it's required, but it's nice if you can pull just a grade level.
Right.
Then they're seeing it in the 6th grade classroom. There's reasons teachers don't implement, and we want to remove as many of those as possible with this model.
Yeah. I'm thinking the other teachers teach math. Those elementary teachers are also teaching English. Some of them are teaching social studies. Sometimes they're teaching those contents. If I'm an English teacher, I could do this with 3rd, 4th, right? Because the skills you're teaching in 3, 4, 5 are not that different. Whereas in social studies, the difference between American history and world history, the content is different. So it might be more difficult unless you're talking about learning strategies as opposed to content implementation.
Yeah, that's one of our learns is even if we're dealing with the strategy, teachers tend to see the content and that becomes barrier.
Really?
And so that's the evidence. Go ahead, Debbie.
Well, I think that if you take a math teacher in a classroom and the content is unfamiliar to her or him, or it's outside what they're comfortable with or what they can confidently teach themselves, then I think it allows them to put up this wall or this kind of shutdown mode where I'm not going to really get involved in the questioning here because that's not content that's pertinent to my classroom anyway. So I just think it puts up a false barrier.
So do you try not to have too much cross grade classes?
Traditionally, if it's 8th grade, we have teachers in the room.
Okay.
If it's 7th grade, we have 7th grade teachers in the room. If a district chooses, it's fine. It'll work. It's in our experience that if it's grade level specific, impact is greater. And that's one of the big things is I love what you said at the beginning, Dan. I nail the PD. I come out. I'm like, man, this was good. And the teachers are hyped. That was a great day, Jason. And then nothing. It has no impact whatsoever. I want the professional development we do to impact students, not to make teachers feel good.
Dan, you said something about school teams or school leaders, and it is imperative that leadership be on board because teachers can't just make this happen. Leadership has to be on board to provide them the space for this to happen, provide the sub, come into the training alongside their teachers so that this interim support is there when we're not on campus, so that the administrators come into the PD, they know what strategies we're trying to implement, they listen to the debriefing, they listen to the planning, and so they are able to go in classrooms with an informed set of look-fors when they go into the classrooms based on what we've done in professional development because they were there.
So I have a team of common course teachers, and you said 3rd grade. Did the school just say we just want to help 3rd grade teachers, or did you this for several grades?
So I would spend 3 days in the school district. I'd go for 3rd grade and then a day with 4th grade and then a day with 5th grade.
Okay.
In North Carolina, we're doing a day with 7th grade and 8th grade.
Okay. Got it.
In different places, it's a 3.
It's a day per course or per. I want to go slightly deeper into some of these. Talk about planning your 2 hours. When you plan that initial 2 hours, you're thinking about the lesson, how they're going to plan the lesson, and how they're going to enact the lesson. So what are some of the core components for somebody who's using this model when they're thinking about that 2 hour intro what are some of the key things that they want to include in that to prepare them for the observe, the plan, and the enact?
Thinking about North Carolina, we have certain frameworks that we use that are included in the grant. They provide the foundation for everything we do with those teachers. In North Carolina, we focus on the effective mathematics teaching practices and the What Works Clearinghouse problem-solving strategies. So that provides the background. So we know the content or the strategy that we are going to use. For instance, 2 weeks ago, we did productive struggle, which aligns with those frameworks. So we aligned the frameworks and then we broke them down into what topics make sense together, what pedagogical topics made sense together. We build the training, the professional development around certain strategies or certain pieces of that framework. Then we find out where the teachers are in their pacing, because when we go into a classroom, we want to make sure that we are using content-specific tasks that all the students have access to. We can't go in and teach them something for the first time. We need to make sure that those students have the prerequisite skills that they need to access the task we're going to be doing with them. We don't know our students. So we talk to the teachers about where they are in content, where they are in their pacing in their course, and then we try to build a task or find a task that it fits into their pacing so that the students, we were just doing this last week, and now here's what it looks like in a task using these effective teaching practices or using these standards for mathematical practice or using the problem-solving strategies from the What Works Clearinghouse. So that's really the foundation for the training, and then we just build out from there. So we make sure that we are hitting the frameworks that are mandated by the grant that we're in, and we've said, hey, this is what we're going to deliver. So we want to make sure that we're aligned to what we've promised in the grant.
Right.
And we also want to align to the current pacing in the classroom so that students have access.
I hear you saying that you have to make sure that the thing they're learning is really important and really highly effective and predictable. It's going to have an impact.
Yes.
I agree 100%. There's some kind of needs analysis that occurred.
Yeah.
So in the grant, there was a needs analysis that said there's these common practices that NCTM, What's Works Clearinghouse has come to say, these are things that need to. So then we went to the districts and said, is this something you're seeing? In Delaware, they were like, our teachers don't have deep conceptual understanding of math. And our teachers aren't using the curricular resource that we purchased in a way that is student-centered. Whatever it is, they're like, this isn't happening. How can this professional development meet those needs? It's personalized to the need that the district or that together SREB and the district see bubble to the surface.
You seek first to understand before you try to be understood. And you ask a lot of questions and learn about what their needs are. And you're describing that on a district, state level, whereas your typical coach would be doing that maybe on an individual level, right?
Or a school level, right? Yep.
I'm curious about the classroom that they're all going to observe. Let's say I'm the teacher, right? I'm one of your 6 teachers and it's my classroom. Walk me through the conversation you have with me 2 weeks before you come in. What does that conversation look like? What is it that you need to know about the class before you make the lesson?
So number one, I don't want to know about students. I need to know mainly what concepts you're teaching, you think you'll be teaching the week come in. And if we're utilizing the curricular materials that the district purchased, I need the lesson, right? But if we're not, if I'm going to design something, I need to know what kind of experiences have the kids had, like what are the concepts they're learning, so I can design something that stretches them but is attainable, right? So really, those are the big questions. And then I love what Debbie mentioned it earlier. I want to set you up for the fact that very different standing in the front of the room teaching than it is standing in the back of the room. And that's one of the reasons I really like this is remember very much my first day as a coach. You know, I never watched another teacher teach until I became a coach. I didn't have an internship or anything like that. My first day in front of kids was my first day teaching. And
Wow.
so, then I just learned by doing. I came out and I'm like, whoa, I'm standing in the back. I'm like, I wonder why they asked that question instead of this question. I talked to the teacher afterwards. I was concerned about all these logistical aspects of teaching. I think as a teacher, I don't have this broad lens in the moment when I'm actually teaching. So I want to set you up with the mindset that you're going to observe your students from a different perspective. And that's been a real win, I think.
Yeah.
Teachers don't get to see their students through a reflective lens.
I think a perfect example is we were in a classroom several months ago, and this student did great. She did so well in digging into, they were dealing with integers. And the student, she saw a vertical number line on the wall, and I saw her get up and go to the vertical number line, and she turned back to her group and began to explain to them the movement on a vertical number line. And so in the lesson, we paused at the end of the lesson because we want to expose student strategies as well. That's part of one of our strategies, student thinking. This student shared and did a great job, confidently got up there and used the vertical number line and explained her use of it. When we came out with the teachers to debrief, one of the teachers' statement was, I was shocked to see that student share because that particular student stays in ISS. Jason and I went into that classroom with no preconceived notions that everybody's got a clean slate. And I don't care what yesterday looked like. Today, this is what we're doing. And it really gave those students opportunities to shine.
Yeah.
So
It's when you do that, you can really see what preconceived notions do. Just a teacher saying to me, watch out for Jimmy, he's a live wire, will completely change my unconscious and maybe even conscious interactions with Jimmy, and changes the lesson and the interactive experience almost unwillingly. You can't do anything about it. So by taking that away,
yes,
actually frees those students more than they might be without that.
I think teachers do that to try to help prepare us.
Absolutely.
But they're not doing it in a detrimental way. But it does put up that, oh, that must be Jimmy kind of thing.
Yeah. And I might raise my voice to Jimmy after his first time, whereas otherwise, if I just didn't have any idea, I might not.
We don't want to limit their potential.
Yeah. So the teachers are observing you teach, and you said that you give them something to look for. You've designed that beforehand. Describe what some of those things look like. If a coach is doing an AP or a lead teacher is doing a model lesson, what are the kinds of things you want to have in teachers' hands or you want to prepare teachers with?
We're just thinking about some kind of graphic organizer with 2 or 3 focusing questions that draws their attention to the thing that we're trying to implement versus the way I wrote on the blackboard.
The way I spoke to Jimmy.
Right. Yeah. If we're working on productive struggle, what questions did Jason ask today that really promoted a struggle with kids? I don't pretend that this is going to be perfect.
Right.
I'm not perfect. Right. And so where did Jason do something that stifled productive? Sometimes I remove the struggle by asking the question the wrong way or pairing 2 students together where one has the right answer and one has no clue. And then the right answer is like, just do it this way. And so we're forcing them to look for the right things. And so when we started doing that, we started seeing all the teachers are seeing the same things so that when we plan, we're setting up the P and plan with the graphic organizer.
Yeah.
Us have been through hundreds of classrooms, maybe thousands at this point. And we have the ability to sort of look closely at these things and think about, okay, this is a strength and this is something that I can give feedback on to help. And I think teachers don't have that experience. I'll ask the teacher, give me feedback. What could I have done differently? Sometimes they struggle with that question, with looking at a lesson from a coaching, continuous improvement lens. It's possible that it was flawless, but highly unlikely. I'm wondering, is that something you ever noticed? Debbie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when you were talking, it made me think about a situation I had with an assistant principal once, and we were going into some classrooms, and we sat down to talk about what our look-fors for the day were going to be. And he said, I want us to look for engagement. And I said, okay, we're going to be in your office for a little while because you and I have to come to a common understanding of what engagement looks like. And so it's the same thing with teachers. Our goal with the H part of this, the hearing, is to point out the strategies and the effectiveness and the impact on students. When teachers go into the classroom with that graphic organizer, when Debbie or Jason asks this question, not just recording the question, but also having them, how did that impact students? Mm-hmm. What did students do when I asked that? So really teaching them some of the instructional coaching strategies that we have the benefit of experiencing day to day, because teachers are in front of the classrooms. They're trying to get XYZ done in 45 minutes and get everyone out the door. And the next group comes in. So they don't have time to really reflect on what just happened in that classroom. Right. This gives them the opportunity to slow down and think about feedback, whether it's feedback to me or Jason, or feedback to one of their peer teachers, or that reflective feedback they give to themselves. We think this process helps them answer those questions. So if you had some feedback to give, what would it be?
Let me ask you, have you ever had a lesson completely melt down and be a complete and train wreck?
100%.
Tell me about what the follow-up is like.
I went into this one classroom under the understanding that students had learned a specific skill, that they were ready for the next step in the lesson I was doing. It was similarity of geometric shapes, and it's based in proportionality. And proportionality is a multiplicative relationship. In my mind, the lesson was around two students, and they're standing opposite each other, looking at each other, and they're looking into a mirror on the ground. You have to get students to understand that there are these imaginary similar triangles that are formed. In my mind, I thought, how am I ever going to get students to understand that they are drawing similar triangles? That's what I thought was going to be the big hiccup. That was not the hiccup, because immediately students started trying to sketch out what the two people were looking at. Anyway, the triangles weren't the issue. Then when we got to the triangles and we got to the point, okay, well, what are we going to do with the triangles? That's where the idea of similarity came in. And no student in that classroom understood proportionality as a multiplicative relationship. They all tried to make it an additive relationship. A huge roadblock. So we just pivoted and continued through the lesson, continued constructing what we knew about the triangles. And then we paused it at the end and said, you are going to revisit this next week with your teacher, now that you've got some background knowledge about it. In the debrief, when it came out that students didn't really understand the multiplication relationship there, but now they have a need to know. So we use that lesson as you've created now this need to know. So now as you're teaching this proportionality content skill, you can always go back to, remember the similar triangles that you drew? This applies to that. And so we just pivoted. We got students to dig in as much as they could. They did struggle with that, but the struggle fed that need to know the content that was coming up.
So it revealed where the teacher needed to go next. It helped them see that.
It revealed gaps for sure.
Jason, tell me about a massive lesson implosion.
Yeah, I think that it comes down to, we were in an elementary school classroom and the kids were not able to handle social tasks. Like, I thought low floor tasks were all going to be fine. And so they had no clue at that moment what was going on. One student, usually if I have one student, I
Right.
can build off of it. But when you have no student, and
Yep.
so the ability then to say, we have a problem, right?
Yeah, from scratch,
and then
right.
and to pivot and say, what's the background knowledge we need to build within these kids to have them
Right.
access the task? And so
Tell me, I want to know, because we're kind of running out of time. So I want you to
Yep.
skip to the debrief, right? Because I'm thinking about myself and as a coach, and I try to do model lessons all the time. And in my mind, every time I do it, there's a little voice saying, if you screw this up, everyone will know that you're a failure, that you're a phony, you'll be figured out, and you better not mess it up because they're all watching you. And this better be a great lesson. And I know that's not the approach, but there's a certain, when you do a model lesson, it turns out to be a disaster. That can be very scary. On the other hand, it seems like you can use it. So I'm curious. So you went in there, you thought that they were at level. No one was. The lesson is a mess. Now let's go to the debrief. And what does that look like?
every teacher in their classroom has some sign that says mistakes are opportunities for learning, right? And so I go straight to that. Like, what an opportunity to learn
Right.
when something doesn't go well. That's my opportunity. That's when I learn something. If I do things right all the time, I already know it. I try to spin it to say, man, what an opportunity where we can learn that your kids persevered. They tried hard. We learned some stuff about your kids. We also learned that they have some significant gaps. How are we going to address that? Part of it is in the lesson plan. The lesson I planned was inappropriate for the kids. And that's hard happens sometimes because I wasn't there yesterday and the day before.
Right.
But then
It
the other
happens to
side is
teachers.
we can,
It's going to happen to teachers there every day.
and that's why I said, this is going to happen when you turn the page and the kids, there's a big learning that occurred between lesson 1 and lesson 2, and the kids didn't get it. It's going to happen. So what can I learn from this? And then how can I create a just-in-time intervention
Right.
supports kids' ability to access whatever lesson, like the proportional reason or the multiplicative reasoning instead of additive that Debbie was talking about.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I think Jason hit on a point too, is that we talk about relationship building in coaching. And I think that when we are willing to be vulnerable in front of the teachers, because we ask them to be vulnerable in front of us all the time,
All the time.
we kind of get that reciprocal relationship of, listen, we're willing to get in there with you and do this and expose our vulnerabilities. But you can't let that shake you. You have to, like Jason said, you have to understand not everything's always going to be 100% of the time. But going into the debrief knowing that this is an opportunity for learning for all of us. And they become more willing to be vulnerable in front of you because you've done it in front of them.
I try to preview a model lesson with this might not go well. And if not, that's great. Because we are going to learn as much from this lesson being a train wreck as we will learn from it being a success. And, for some kids, it might be success. And for some kids in this class, they might be lost, right? It's not either or. It might be great for some kids and not great for other kids. I need you to look for that. I need you to see that and tell me, right? And give me feedback on which kids are missing out on this lesson. And we're trying to get our antenna up.
We plan for success, but when success doesn't happen for everyone, that teaches us a lot about the students in our room.
It's a learning experience, I say. So that's our time. Could you give any last advice on that next step after we have observe, plan, and now they're enacting? What are some things you want teachers to think about or support coaches to help ensure that the enact is successful? Or what are the key things that you think about when you get into that stage?
I love what you said. The first success is the teacher trying it. Like setting them up for this might not be perfect the first time you try it. That's why we come back a second time and a third time. It's because, man, I'm asking you to move from a teacher-centered teacher to a student-centered lesson. I do, we do, you do versus explore. That is uncomfortable. That is not a for some teachers, they see it and it clicks. But for some, it doesn't. Success is you trying it and coming back with experiential questions instead of, well, I never tried it. I never got into the arena. And so I think we want to define what success is. Success is trying the strategy that we started and being vulnerable enough to say, I'm going to try this, and then I'm going to come back with questions, or, hey, I want to see it again, Jason, or I'm going to take the lead. But, in the next model, the teacher's going to be a side by side. I'm trying to implement the thing that you're doing. Like when I see success, it's the enactment. Like it doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter as much as what direction you're heading.
Okay.
Yep.
Got that from my pastor.
Okay, good.
I'm throwing it out there.
But
it's true.
Where you are doesn't matter as much as what direction you're heading.
Right. The direction you're heading is in this move. If you're way far away or really close to it, it doesn't matter as long as you're moving towards.
I can tell you that both of you and all the teachers you're working with are moving in a direction of improvement. And that's super exciting. We can't wait to see in a couple years the results of this major grant in North Carolina with 100 teachers across the state using this model and seeing what sort of data is collected in terms of its impact. Appreciate you joining us for the Making Schools Work podcast. Jason Adair, Debbie Robertson, Ashley Shaw for producing the podcast. We will see you all next time.
The contents of this podcast were developed under a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. The department does not mandate or prescribe practices, models, or other activities described or discussed in this podcast. The contents of this podcast may contain examples of, adaptions of, and links to resources created and maintained by another public or private organization. The department does not control or guarantee the accuracy, relevance, timeliness, or completeness of this outside information. The content of this podcast does not necessarily represent the policy of the department. This publication is not intended to represent the views or policy of or be an endorsement of any views expressed or materials provided by any federal agency. Thank you for listening to this episode brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. SREB is a nonprofit dedicated to improving education from pre-K all the way to PhD and into the workforce. Visit sreb.org for resources on instructional practices, teacher data, career pathways, and more. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at SREB-School Improvement and on Twitter/X and Instagram, both at SREB Education. See you next week.